Mistaken for a driver, the millionaire said nothing and drove her home. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, it is free, and it is the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories like this one. Your support truly means the world to us. And tell us, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or your countries in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us go back to our main character. It was just past 9 in the evening when Daniel Carter stood beside a black luxury sedan parked quietly along the curb. The city lights reflected off the polished paint, but Daniel did not look like the kind of man people noticed. He wore a simple dark jacket, no logo, no watch visible, his posture relaxed, almost invisible. Inside the building behind him, the glass doors slid open. Evelyn Moore stepped out, heels clicking sharply against the concrete. She looked exhausted. Her shoulders were tense, her phone pressed tightly in her hand, as if she had just ended a call she did not want to take. She did not look up, she did not slow down. She walked straight toward Daniel. "Finally," she said, her tone clipped. "I am late, drive me home." Daniel did not correct her. He did not explain that this was his car. He did not tell her that he owned the company whose name was glowing at the top of the skyscraper behind them. He did not say that his net worth was measured in hundreds of millions of dollars. He simply reached out, opened the rear passenger door, and stepped aside. Evelyn paused for half a second, just long enough to register the gesture, then slid into the back seat without another word. She kicked off her heels and leaned her head against the window, already scrolling through messages, already somewhere else. Daniel closed the door gently. Only then did he walk around the car, open the driver's door, and sit behind the wheel. As he pulled away from the curb, the city moved past them in streaks of white and red light. Traffic was heavy, but Daniel drove smoothly, patiently, as if time did not press on him the way it pressed on everyone else. In the rearview mirror, he could see Evelyn's reflection. Her eyes were closed now. Her lips were pressed together, not in anger, but in exhaustion. This was not arrogance. This was a woman who had been carrying too much for too long. "Take the highway," she said suddenly, without opening her eyes. "I do not want to sit in traffic." Daniel nodded, even though she could not see it. "Yes, ma'am," he replied calmly. The word felt strange in his mouth, not because he was offended, but because of how easily the world placed people into boxes. Driver, passenger, power, service. Evelyn opened her eyes and glanced at him in the mirror. "You are quiet," she said. "Most drivers talk too much." Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "I listen," he said simply. She studied him for a moment, then looked away. Outside, the skyline faded into darker streets, quieter neighborhoods, the kind of places where the noise of the city softened and the weight of the day finally had room to settle. Daniel's hands rested steady on the steering wheel. He had made a decision the moment she mistook him for a driver. Tonight, he would say nothing. The car moved steadily along the highway, the hum of tires against asphalt filling the silence. Streetlights passed overhead in slow, even intervals, casting brief shadows across the dashboard. Daniel kept his focus forward, his hands calm on the steering wheel, his posture unchanged. In the back seat, Evelyn shifted slightly and let out a quiet breath. "Long day," she said, more to herself than to him. Daniel did not respond right away. He had learned that silence often invited more honesty than questions ever could. After a moment, she continued. "Meetings all afternoon, people talking in circles. Everyone wants something, and nobody listens." She shook her head lightly. "I swear, if I hear the word synergy one more time, I might lose my mind." Daniel glanced at the rearview mirror. Her eyes were open now, fixed on the blur of the city outside her window. "Yes, ma'am," he said again, evenly. She frowned slightly. "You do not have to call me that." He nodded. "Understood." Another stretch of silence followed, heavier this time. Not uncomfortable, just full. Evelyn leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes again. "You drive well," she said. "Smooth, not like the last guy." "Thank you," Daniel replied. She hesitated, then added, "Most drivers I know rush, like they are trying to get rid of me." Daniel allowed a small pause before speaking. Some people confuse speed with efficiency. That made her open her eyes. She looked at him again through the mirror, really looked this time. His voice was calm, thoughtful, not the bored tone she expected, not rehearsed. Huh, she said softly. That is actually true. The car exited the highway and turned onto quieter streets, tree-lined roads, older houses, the kind of neighborhood where the city felt distant, almost gentle. Evelyn adjusted her coat and glanced down at her phone. Her screen lit up with a missed call. She sighed and set the phone face down on the seat beside her. "I am not calling back," she said. "Not tonight." Daniel did not ask who it was. A few blocks later, a gas station came into view. The sign flickered slightly, the price numbers glowing red in the dark. "Can you pull in there?" she asked. "I forgot my charger at the office, and my phone is about to die." Daniel slowed and turned into the station without question. He parked near the entrance and stepped out first. Evelyn watched through the window as he walked inside. He moved with an ease that did not match the role she had placed him in. No hurry, no slouch, just quiet confidence. A minute later, he returned with a charger and a bottle of water. "Here," he said, handing them to her. She reached into her purse and frowned. "I do not have cash," she said. "I assume the company—" She stopped herself. "Never mind." Daniel shook his head. "It is taken care of." She looked up at him, surprised. "You did not have to do that." "I know," he said. Something about that answer lingered. As he pulled back onto the road, Evelyn unscrewed the water bottle and took a small sip. Her shoulders relaxed, just a little. "Do you like this job?" she asked suddenly. Daniel considered the question. "It depends on the day." She smiled faintly. "That is the most honest answer I have heard all week." They drove the rest of the way in a quieter mood. Not distant, just thoughtful. When they reached her street, Daniel slowed to a stop in front of a modern townhouse, lights glowing warmly through the windows. "This is fine," she said, reaching for the door handle. Then she paused. "Hey." Daniel looked back. "Thank you," she said. Not sharply, not out of habit, but sincerely. "You are welcome," he replied. She stepped out of the car and turned back once more before closing the door. "For what it is worth," she added, "you are not what I expected." Daniel met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Neither are you," he said. The door closed gently. Daniel waited until she was safely inside before pulling away. As the car disappeared down the street, Evelyn stood for a moment on the sidewalk, watching the empty road, unaware that the quiet driver she had dismissed all evening had just begun testing the most important thing of all. The next morning came quietly, but Daniel Carter's day had already begun long before the city fully woke. He stood in his office on the 42nd floor, hands resting lightly on the glass, looking out over the skyline. From here, the streets below looked orderly, predictable, very different from the way people behaved once they thought no one important was watching. Behind him, his assistant waited patiently. "Your first meeting is at 9, she said. "Then the board call at 11, and tonight, the charity gala." Daniel nodded. "Cancel the board call." She paused. "Sir?" "I want to see something first," he said. "Reschedule it." When she left, Daniel picked up his phone. He opened a message thread that had been quiet for years. Then he typed a single line. "Are you still driving?" The reply came almost immediately. "Always. What do you need?" Daniel smiled faintly. That evening, Evelyn Moore stepped out of her townhouse wearing a fitted black dress and a guarded expression. The day had been relentless. Emails, calls, problems that never seemed to belong to anyone else but her. The same black sedan was waiting at the curb. She hesitated for half a second, then walked over. "You again," she said, not unkindly. "I was hoping it would be you." Daniel opened the door for her, just as he had the night before. "Yes, ma'am," he said. She rolled her eyes slightly as she got in. "I told you, do not call me that." He nodded. "Understood." As the car pulled away, she glanced at him through the mirror. "You ever get tired of driving people like me around?" she asked. Daniel did not answer right away. "People like you?" She shrugged. "Busy, demanding, probably not very pleasant." He considered his words carefully. "Everyone has something weighing on them. Some people just hide it better." That made her quiet. They drove in silence for a few minutes before Evelyn spoke again. "My assistant quit today," she said suddenly. "No notice, just sent an email and disappeared." "That is unfortunate," Daniel replied. "She said I was impossible to work for," Evelyn continued. Can you believe that? Daniel kept his eyes on the road. Did she explain why? Evelyn frowned. She said I never listened. The words hung in the air. Daniel said nothing. The car slowed as traffic thickened near the event center. Outside, people in formal wear moved toward the entrance, laughter and music drifting through the open doors. Daniel pulled to the curb. I will wait here, he said. Evelyn reached for the door, then stopped. She looked back at him. Are you coming inside? She asked, half joking. Daniel shook his head. That is not my role. She studied him for a moment, then nodded and stepped out. The evening passed faster than she expected. Conversations blurred together. Compliments felt hollow. Somewhere between the speeches and the applause, Evelyn found herself thinking about the quiet man in the car. When she finally returned, her heels were in her hand, and her smile was gone. Home, she said softly. Halfway through the drive, they came upon a stalled car on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking. A woman stood beside it, phone pressed to her ear, panic written across her face. Evelyn sighed. Do not stop, we will be late. Daniel slowed anyway. That woman may need help, he said. I have had a long day, Evelyn replied. She can call roadside assistance. Daniel pulled over. He stepped out of the car before Evelyn could say anything else. For a long moment, Evelyn watched him through the window as he spoke to the stranded woman, then helped push the car safely off the road. When he returned, Evelyn did not speak right away. I thought you were in a hurry, Daniel said calmly. She looked away. I was. The rest of the drive was quiet, but something had shifted. When Daniel dropped her off that night, Evelyn did not rush inside. You did not have to stop, she said. Daniel met her eyes. Some things matter more than being on time. She nodded slowly, as if committing the idea to memory. As Daniel drove away, he already knew the answer to the question he had been asking himself. But one test still remained. The days that followed settled into an unexpected rhythm. Daniel returned each evening at nearly the same time, the black sedan appearing at the curb as if it belonged there. Evelyn noticed it more than she expected to, not because it was impressive, but because it was consistent. On the fourth night, she came out earlier than usual. You are punctual, she said as she slipped into the back seat. Most people are not. Daniel closed the door and took his place behind the wheel. Habits matter, he replied. She watched him through the mirror, then looked away. You sound like my father. Daniel said nothing. They drove through a part of the city Evelyn rarely saw anymore. Older storefronts, small restaurants with handwritten menus taped to the windows. She frowned slightly. This is not the usual route, she said. There is construction ahead, Daniel explained. This will be faster. She hesitated, then nodded. All right. They stopped at a red light near a corner grocery store. A man stood outside holding a cardboard sign. His coat was thin. His hands were red from the cold. Evelyn shifted in her seat. Lock the doors, she said automatically. Daniel did not move. He is not approaching us, he said calmly. I know, she replied. Still. Daniel glanced at the man, then back at the road. He did not lock the doors. The light turned green, and they drove on. A few minutes later, Evelyn spoke again, her voice quieter. I used to volunteer, she said, before things got busy. Daniel nodded once. What changed? Success, she answered, or what people call success. They reached a small cafe near the river. Evelyn leaned forward suddenly. Stop here, she said. I need coffee. Daniel pulled over. Inside, the cafe was warm and dimly lit. Evelyn ordered quickly, then realized Daniel had followed her in. You do not have to wait inside, she said. I am not in a hurry, he replied. She studied him, then sighed. Fine, get something if you want. He ordered a simple coffee and paid before she could stop him. I told you, you do not have to. I know, he said again. They sat at a small table by the window. For the first time, they were on equal ground. No wheel, no mirror, just two people. You never talk about yourself, Evelyn said, stirring her cup. Not even a little. There is not much to say, Daniel replied. I doubt that, she said. People who listen as well as you do usually have something they are not sharing. Daniel met her eyes. And people who talk as much as you do usually have something they are avoiding. She froze, then laughed softly. That is unfairly accurate. Outside, the man with the cardboard sign passed by the window. Evelyn watched him, then reached into her purse. She pulled out a bill and stood. "I will be right back," she said. Daniel watched as she stepped outside and handed the money to the man. They exchanged a few words. She smiled. Not the polished smile she used at events, but a real one. When she returned, she sat down quietly. "You did not have to do that," Daniel said gently. "I know," she replied, "but it felt wrong not to." They finished their coffee in silence. Back in the car, Evelyn rested her head against the seat. "You know," she said, "if you ever want a better job, I could put in a word. You are wasted behind a wheel." Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "I appreciate that." "But," she pressed. "But I like seeing people as they are," he said. She smiled faintly. "That is a strange thing to like." When they reached her house, Evelyn did not open the door right away. "Thank you," she said, "for tonight, for listening." "You are welcome," Daniel replied. As she walked inside, Daniel remained in the car, his decision growing heavier with every test she passed. She was changing, and soon she would need to know why. The following evening brought rain. Not heavy, not dramatic, just enough to darken the pavement and soften the city lights into long reflections. Daniel arrived on time, as he always did. Evelyn was already waiting under the awning when he pulled up. She opened the door herself this time. "Traffic is awful," she said as she got in. "Everyone forgets how to drive when it rains." Daniel smiled faintly but said nothing. They had barely gone 2 blocks when her phone rang. Evelyn glanced at the screen and sighed. "It is my brother," she said. "I should take this." She answered, her voice tightening almost immediately. "No, I told you already. I cannot fix this for you. Not again." She paused, listening, then shook her head. "That is not fair, and you know it." Daniel focused on the road, but he did not miss the way her hand clenched around the phone. When the call ended, Evelyn stared out the window. "Family can be exhausting," she said quietly. "Yes," Daniel replied. "They know where to press." They arrived at a downtown restaurant where Evelyn was meeting a client for a late dinner. Daniel pulled to the curb, but before she could get out, a valet approached the car. "You cannot park here," the man said sharply, looking past Daniel. "Drivers need to move along." Evelyn frowned. "He is with me." The valet glanced at Daniel, unimpressed. "Ma'am, I am just doing my job." "So is he," Evelyn said, her voice firmer now. "Wait your turn." The valet hesitated, then stepped back without another word. Daniel opened the door for her. She paused. "Thank you," she said, not softly, clearly. "I will wait," Daniel replied. The dinner lasted longer than expected. When Evelyn returned, her expression was tight with frustration. "They tried to pressure me," she said as soon as she sat down. "Corner me into agreeing to terms that benefit them." "And did you?" Daniel asked. "No," she said. "I walked away." She exhaled slowly. It felt good. Terrifying, but good. As they drove, the rain picked up. Traffic slowed to a crawl near a construction zone. Horns blared. Tempers flared. A car suddenly cut in front of them, forcing Daniel to brake hard. The driver leaned out his window and shouted something vulgar. Evelyn stiffened. "Do not engage," she said quickly. "People are unpredictable." Daniel nodded. He waited until the other car sped off before moving forward again. "You handled that well," she added. "Most drivers would have yelled back." "Noise rarely solves anything," Daniel replied. They stopped at a red light near a bus stop. A woman stood there, holding a child close, both soaked and shivering. The bus shelter was full. Evelyn watched them in silence. "Do you have an umbrella?" she asked suddenly. Daniel reached into the trunk and handed her one. Without another word, Evelyn stepped out of the car and crossed the street. Daniel watched as she offered the umbrella to the woman, then draped her own coat over the child's shoulders. When she returned, she was wet and breathing hard. "Thank you," the woman had said. "God bless you." Evelyn sat back in her seat, quiet. "You did not have to do that," Daniel said gently. "I know," she replied, "but I remembered what you said, about what matters." The rest of the drive passed without conversation. When they reached her house, Evelyn did not get out right away. "You know," she said, "when I first saw you, I thought you were just someone paid to take orders." Daniel met her eyes in the mirror. "And now?" he asked. "Now," she said slowly, "I think you might be the most grounded person I know." She opened the door, then paused. "I hope you will drive me again tomorrow," she added. "I will," Daniel said. As she disappeared inside, Daniel sat in the quiet car, rain tapping steadily against the windshield. The tests were no longer about her manners. They were about her values. And soon, there would be no place left to hide the truth. The reveal did not come with an announcement. It came quietly, the way truth often does. The next afternoon, Daniel received a call he had been expecting. He listened without interrupting, his expression calm. "Yes," he said finally. "Tonight will be fine." He arrived at Evelyn's house just after sunset. She stepped out wearing a deep blue coat, her hair pulled back neatly. She looked surprised when she saw him. "You are early," she said. "I wanted to be," Daniel replied. They drove in silence for several minutes before Evelyn spoke. "Tonight is important," she said. "There are investors coming in from out of town, people who decide things with a single look." Daniel nodded. "Then I will make sure you arrive calm." She smiled faintly. "You always do." The event was held downtown, in one of the tallest buildings in the city. Valets lined the entrance. Guests moved beneath glowing lights, their laughter drifting into the night. Daniel pulled the car to the curb. "I will wait," he said. Evelyn hesitated. "You know, you could come inside, just for a drink." Daniel met her eyes in the mirror. "That would complicate things." She laughed softly. "Everything complicates things." She stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance. Daniel remained behind the wheel. Inside, the evening unfolded as expected. Handshakes, compliments, conversations that sounded meaningful but said very little. Evelyn moved through the room with practiced ease, but her attention drifted more than once toward the windows. An hour later, a hush moved through the crowd. People turned. A man near the stage raised his glass. "Before we continue," he said, smiling broadly, "I would like to acknowledge someone special, a partner, a visionary, the man who made this entire project possible." Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. "Our guest of honor tonight," the man continued, "Mr. Daniel Carter." Applause filled the room. Evelyn froze. She watched as Daniel Carter stepped onto the stage from a side entrance. Not the man behind the wheel, not the quiet driver who opened doors and waited patiently, but the same man, same posture, same calm eyes. He accepted the applause with a polite nod, then spoke briefly about responsibility, about people, about listening before leading. Evelyn could not hear the rest. Her mind replayed every moment, every word, every silence, the car, the coffee, the umbrella, the way he never corrected her. The applause faded as Daniel stepped down. Evelyn stood very still. She found him moments later in a quiet hallway, away from the noise. "So," she said, her voice tight, "this is who you are." Daniel turned to face her. "Yes." "You let me believe you were my driver," she said. "You let me order you around." "I let you show me who you were," he replied gently. Her eyes flashed. "That is not fair." "No," he said, "but it was honest." She took a step closer. "Why did you not say anything?" "Because people treat drivers the way they truly feel," Daniel answered. "And I needed to know if kindness was still there when you thought it did not matter." Silence stretched between them. Evelyn swallowed. "And your verdict?" Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "You changed," he said. "That matters." Her shoulders sagged slightly. "I feel foolish." "Growth often feels that way," he replied. She shook her head slowly. "You turned my world upside down." Daniel held her gaze. "Only because you were willing to look." Outside, the city lights glowed steadily, indifferent to the quiet reckoning taking place inside. The truth was finally out. And now, Evelyn had to decide what to do with it. The days after the gala felt heavier than the night itself. Evelyn did not call the next morning. Daniel did not send a message. For the first time since they met, there was distance. Not physical, but emotional. The kind that forces reflection, whether you want it or not. Evelyn sat alone in her kitchen, a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands. Her phone lay face up on the table, silent. She replayed every moment again and again, the way she had spoken to him, the assumptions she never questioned, the quiet dignity with which he had accepted them. She had built her life on control, on competence, on never being the one caught off guard. And yet, She had never felt smaller than she did standing in that hallway, realizing the man she trusted most had seen her at her worst and her best. That afternoon, her assistant knocked gently on her office door. "Mr. Carter is here," she said carefully. "He asked if you were available." Evelyn's breath caught. "Send him in," she said after a moment. Daniel entered alone. No entourage, no title announced, just the same calm presence she had come to recognize. They stood across from each other in silence. "I did not come to explain myself," Daniel said finally. "I came to give you space, and a choice." Evelyn folded her arms, more to steady herself than to defend. "A choice?" "Yes," he said. "We can pretend none of this happened. You can go back to seeing me as who I am in public, or we can be honest about what changed." She looked away. "You humiliated me." "I challenged you," Daniel replied. "There is a difference." Her jaw tightened. "You decided I needed a lesson." "No," he said firmly. "I decided I needed the truth." Evelyn laughed softly, without humor. "And what was the truth?" Daniel did not answer immediately. "The truth," he said slowly, "is that when you thought I was powerless, you were sharp, dismissive, but not cruel. And when you realized I mattered, you did not flatter me. You confronted yourself." She met his eyes again. "You do not get to judge me." "I know," Daniel said. "That is why the choice is yours." She walked to the window and stared out at the city, the same streets she had ridden through without seeing, the same people she had passed without noticing. "I hated how you made me feel," she said quietly, "but I hate even more that you were right." Daniel remained still. "I have spent years demanding respect," she continued, "and I never stopped to ask if I was giving it." She turned back to him. "Do you know how terrifying that is?" "Yes," Daniel said. "Change always is." Silence settled again, but this time it was different, softer, less defensive. "What happens now?" Evelyn asked. Daniel took a small step back. "Now, I step away, unless you ask me not to." Her heart pounded, not with fear, with clarity. "I do not want you to disappear," she said, "but I also do not want special treatment. I want to know who I am when there is nothing to gain." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then we start there." She exhaled, tension leaving her shoulders for the first time in days. "I was wrong," she said, "about you, about myself." Daniel met her gaze, respect clear in his eyes. "That," he said, "is the hardest thing anyone ever says." Outside, the city moved on as it always did. But inside that quiet office, something fragile and real began to take shape. The change did not happen all at once. It began quietly, with small decisions that felt insignificant, but were not. Daniel stopped arriving in the black sedan. Instead, he met Evelyn on foot outside a modest community center on the edge of downtown. The building was old, the paint faded, the sign slightly crooked. "This is where I spend my Thursdays," Daniel said. Evelyn looked around. "Doing what?" "Listening," he replied. Inside, volunteers moved between folding tables stacked with donated food. People lined up patiently. Some smiled, some did not. Life was heavy here, but it was honest. Daniel greeted everyone the same way, with eye contact, with respect. Evelyn stayed close, unsure of her place. A woman approached them, holding a clipboard. "Are you here to help?" Evelyn hesitated. "I do not know how useful I will be." The woman smiled kindly. Most people feel that way at first. Evelyn rolled up her sleeves. For the first hour, she said very little. She packed boxes. She handed out bags. She listened to stories she could not fix with money or influence. No one knew who she was. No one treated her differently. At first, it unsettled her. Then it grounded her. A young man thanked her for the food and added, "You listen like you care." The words stayed with her. Later that evening, as they walked out together, Evelyn broke the silence. "You never offered me anything," she said. Daniel glanced at her. "I offered you the truth." She nodded slowly. "That was harder." The following weeks tested her resolve. At work, she refused a deal that would have benefited her company but hurt hundreds of employees. The board was furious. "You are letting emotions cloud your judgment," one of them snapped. Evelyn held her ground. "I am letting values guide it." The vote passed without her support. She walked out of the room shaking, but proud. That night she called Daniel. "I think I just made enemies," she said. "You probably did," he replied calmly. "That usually means you did something right." Another week passed. Evelyn began visiting the community center on her own. No cameras, no announcements. She listened more than she spoke. One afternoon, Daniel found her sitting with an older woman, holding her hand as she spoke about losing her home. Daniel did not interrupt. Later, as they walked outside, Evelyn said, "I used to believe leadership meant being untouchable." "And now?" Daniel asked. "Now I think it means being accountable," she replied. The final test came unexpectedly. A journalist published a piece questioning Evelyn's recent decisions. Weak leadership, emotional judgment, softening standards. Her phone rang non-stop. She could have responded, could have defended herself publicly. Instead, she showed up to the community center the next morning. Daniel was there, surprised to see her. "They are tearing me apart online," she said quietly. "And yet," he said, "you are here." She nodded. "I needed to be reminded of who I am choosing to become." Daniel studied her for a long moment. "You passed," he said. She frowned. "Passed what?" "The test you did not know you were taking," he replied. "The one where kindness costs you something." Evelyn let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. "I am not doing this for approval," she said. "Not yours, not anyone's." Daniel smiled. "That is why it matters." As they stood together, watching the city wake up beyond the center's doors, the gap between who Evelyn had been and who she was becoming finally closed. She had not been rewarded. She had been transformed. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. The morning air was cool and clear, the kind that made the city feel honest. Evelyn stood outside the community center, watching volunteers arrive one by one. There were no cameras, no announcements, just people showing up because they chose to. Daniel joined her a moment later, hands in his coat pockets. "You look lighter," he said. "I feel lighter," she replied, "like I am finally standing on my own feet." They walked inside together. The center was busy, alive with quiet purpose. Evelyn greeted people by name now. She knew their stories, not because she owned them, but because she listened. After the last box was packed and the doors closed, Daniel waited as Evelyn finished a conversation near the entrance. When she returned, he handed her a small envelope. "What is this?" she asked. "A choice," he said. Inside was a simple card and a folded document. No logo, no letterhead. Evelyn read it slowly. "You want me to help lead this," she said, looking up. "Not as a donor, not as a figurehead, but as a partner." "Yes," Daniel replied, "on equal ground." She took a breath. "And if I say no?" "Then we walk away with respect," he said. "Nothing is owed." Evelyn thought of the first night she had seen him, standing beside a car, silent, invisible. She folded the paper carefully. "I spent my life being served," she said. "I think it is time I serve something that matters." Daniel nodded once. That evening, there was no driver, no back seat. They walked through the city together, side by side. They stopped at a small restaurant near the river, the kind of place where nobody recognized either of them. Over dinner, Evelyn laughed more than she had in years. "You know," she said, smiling, "I never apologized for how I treated you that first night." Daniel met her gaze. "You showed me who you became. That mattered more." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I am glad you said nothing," she said quietly. "If you had corrected me, I would never have learned to listen." Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "And if you had not changed, I would have walked away." Outside, the city lights reflected off the water, steady and calm. Weeks later, Evelyn stood in front of a small group at the community center. No podium, no speech prepared. "I am not here to save anyone," she said honestly. "I am here to learn, to listen, and to build something together." Daniel watched from the back of the room, pride clear in his eyes. Afterward, as they stepped outside, Evelyn stopped beside a familiar black sedan parked quietly along the curb. She smiled. "You know," she said, "for a while, I thought this car defined you." Daniel shook his head. "It never did." She opened the driver's door and tossed him the keys. "Your turn," she said. "I trust you." Daniel laughed softly as he took them. As they drove away together, the city moved around them, unchanged. But everything else had. She had mistaken him for a driver. He had said nothing. And in that silence, they had both found exactly what they were missing.